The trading post smelled of tobacco and desperation, and Josephine Abbott had learned to recognize both long before her 20th birthday arrived 3 months past. Her stepfather, Silas, had dragged her to this dusty corner of Tascosa, Texas, on a sweltering July afternoon in 1881, his fingers gripping her arm hard enough to leave marks. She had known something terrible was coming when he'd refused to meet her eyes that morning, but nothing could have prepared her for hearing him tell the portly merchant that she was worth a good horse and $50 in supplies. "She can cook and clean," Silas said, his voice slurred from the whiskey he'd been drinking since breakfast. "Ain't much to look at, but she'll work hard." Josephine stood frozen, her face burning with humiliation as the merchant circled her like she was livestock. The shame threatened to choke her, but she refused to cry. She had not cried when her mother died 2 years ago from fever. She had not cried when Silas married her mother on her deathbed just to get his hands on the small farm. She would not cry now. "I will take her." The voice came from behind them, deep and measured. Josephine turned to see a tall man standing in the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking the harsh sunlight. He wore dusty chaps over his work pants and a sweat-stained shirt that had once been blue. His face was shadowed by the brim of his hat, but she could see the strong line of his jaw and the set of his mouth. "Who are you?" Silas demanded, clearly irritated by the interruption. The man stepped inside, and Josephine saw him clearly for the first time. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with weathered tan skin and gray eyes that seemed to see everything. There was something solid about him, something that reminded her of the oak tree that had stood in her mother's garden. "Cole Whitmore," the man said simply. "I run cattle about 10 miles north of here. I heard what you were doing, and I've got a horse you might be interested in." Silas perked up immediately, greed overtaking his drunken haze. "What kind of horse?" "The kind that will get you out of Texas before the sheriff starts asking questions about those missing cattle from the Donovan Ranch." Cole's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath the words. The color drained from Silas's face. Josephine watched the exchange with growing confusion, her heart pounding against her ribs. "I do not know what you are talking about," Silas stammered. "I think you do. I think you know exactly what I am talking about. Now, you can take my horse and whatever supplies you can carry and leave this town today, or you can wait around for Marshal Henderson to piece together what I already have." Cole crossed his arms over his chest. "What will it be?" Silas looked between Cole and Josephine, calculation written across his face. "The horse and $100, the horse and 50, and you sign a paper saying Josephine is no longer your responsibility. She ain't my daughter, just my stepdaughter. I got no legal claim to her anyway." "Then you will not mind signing." The merchant had been watching this exchange with wide eyes, clearly wanting no part of whatever was happening. He scurried behind his counter and produced paper and ink. 15 minutes later, Josephine found herself standing outside the trading post with a piece of paper clutched in her trembling hands. Silas had taken the horse, a sturdy bay mare, and ridden out of town without a backward glance. The man named Cole Whitmore stood beside her, his presence somehow both unsettling and reassuring. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentler now. Josephine found she could not speak. Everything had happened so fast. One moment she was being sold like property, and the next she was free. The word felt strange even in her thoughts. Free. "Miss Abbott," Cole removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. His face was kind, she realized. There were smile lines around his eyes, though he was not smiling now. "I do not understand," she finally managed. "Why did you do that?" "Because what he was doing was wrong. Because you deserve better than being traded for livestock." He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. "I am sorry I could not step in sooner. I only just heard what was happening when I came into town for supplies. But now you are out a horse and $50. I have other horses, and the money does not matter." He met her eyes and she saw sincerity there. "What matters is that you are safe now." Safe. Josephine looked down at the paper in her hands, then at the dusty street of Tascosa stretching out before them. "I have nowhere to go, no money, no family." Cole was quiet for a moment. "I have a proposition for you if you will hear it." Wariness crept into her chest. She had just escaped one terrible situation. She was not eager to walk into another. He must have seen the fear in her eyes because he held up his hands. "Nothing improper. I give you my word. I need someone to help manage my household. My ranch is not large, but I have been running it alone since my mother passed last winter, and the place is falling apart. I need someone who can cook and keep the house in order. I can pay you fair wages and you would have your own room, completely separate from mine. You would hire me." Just like that, just like that. He paused. "Look, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I can take you to meet some folks in town who can vouch for my character. Reverend Michaels has known me since I was a boy. Mrs. Patterson at the general store can tell you I am honest in my dealings. You do not have to decide right now." Josephine considered her options. She could refuse his offer and try to make her own way in Tascosa, but she had no money and no prospects. She could attempt to find work elsewhere, but single women had few respectable opportunities in frontier towns. Or she could take a chance on this stranger who had just bought her freedom. "I want to meet the Reverend first," she said. Relief crossed Cole's features. "Of course. The church is just down the street." They walked together through the dusty town, maintaining a respectful distance from each other. Josephine studied Cole from the corner of her eye, trying to understand what kind of man would do what he had just done. He did not carry himself like the men she had known. There was no swagger, no meanness. He tipped his hat to the women they passed and stepped aside to let an elderly man cross in front of them. Reverend Michaels turned out to be a white-haired man with kind eyes who confirmed everything Cole had said. "Cole Whitmore is one of the finest young men in this county," the Reverend told Josephine. "His father died 5 years ago, and he has been running that ranch with nothing but hard work and integrity. You could not ask for a better employer." After speaking with Mrs. Patterson, who was equally complimentary, Josephine made her decision. She had little choice, really, but something in her gut told her that Cole was telling the truth about his intentions. "I will take the position," she told him as they stood outside the general store. Cole nodded, a small smile finally appearing on his face. "I will make sure you do not regret it. Let me get my supplies loaded and we can head out to the ranch. It is about an hour's ride." "I do not have much to bring," Josephine admitted. Everything she owned was in the small cloth bag Silas had allowed her to carry. "We will get you what you need," Cole said. "Come on. Let us get you some proper clothes for ranch work and anything else you might require." He took her back into the general store and told her to pick out what she needed. Josephine had never been given such freedom before, and she found herself overwhelmed by the choices. She selected 2 simple dresses, a pair of sturdy boots, a coat for the coming winter, and some basic necessities. Cole paid without question, then added a warm quilt and a new hat to protect her from the sun. "You will need these," he said simply. They loaded everything into his wagon, and Josephine climbed up onto the bench seat beside him. As they rolled out of Tascosa, she looked back at the town where she had nearly lost everything. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "How long have you been running the ranch?" she asked, partly to break the silence and partly because she was genuinely curious. On my own. About 6 months, but I have been working it since I was big enough to sit a horse. My father bought the land in 1865, right after the war ended. He came out here from Tennessee with nothing but determination and my mother's faith in him. Cole's voice softened when he spoke of his parents. They built something good out here, something worth keeping. What happened to them? Father died breaking a wild horse 5 years back. Broke his neck in the fall. Mother held on for a while, but I think she died of a broken heart as much as the pneumonia that took her. He was quiet for a moment. They loved each other something fierce. I always hoped I would find that kind of love someday. Josephine did not know what to say to that, so she remained silent, watching the landscape roll by. The Texas plains stretched out endlessly, broken only by occasional clusters of mesquite and patches of prickly pear cactus. The vastness of it all made her feel small, but not in a bad way. For the first time in 2 years, she felt like she could breathe. The ranch appeared on the horizon as the sun hung low in the sky. It was modest, as Cole had said, but Josephine thought it was beautiful. The house was built of wood and stone with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. A barn stood about 50 yards away, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. There was a vegetable garden that had clearly been neglected, and a windmill turning slowly in the breeze. "It is not much," Cole said, sounding almost apologetic. "It is wonderful," Josephine breathed, and she meant it. Cole helped her down from the wagon, his hands steady on her waist. She felt the warmth of his touch even through her layers of clothing, and something stirred in her chest. She pushed the feeling away. She could not afford to develop feelings for her employer. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. The inside of the house was exactly as he had described, functional but desperately in need of a woman's touch. Dust covered every surface, and dishes were piled in the sink. The furniture was good quality but worn, and the curtains hung limp and faded. "Your room is upstairs, first door on the right," Cole said, carrying her bags. "My room is at the end of the hall. There is a washroom between them." Josephine followed him up the narrow staircase. The room he showed her was small but clean, with a window that looked out over the prairie. There was a bed with a simple wooden frame, a dresser, and a chair. Cole set down her bags and backed toward the door. "I will let you get settled. I need to see to the horses and check on the cattle. Come down when you are ready, and we can discuss your duties and wages over supper. I am afraid it will not be much. I have been living off beans and hardtack for weeks." After he left, Josephine sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of everything that had happened. She had been traded like property. She had been saved by a stranger. She was now living in a house with a man she did not know, in a place she had never been, with no idea what tomorrow would bring. And yet, for the first time since her mother died, she felt something like hope. She stood and walked to the window, watching as Cole led the horses to the barn. He moved with easy confidence, speaking softly to the animals as he worked. There was something appealing about his capability, the way he seemed completely at home in his own skin. Josephine shook her head. She could not think about him that way. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging the new dresses in the small wardrobe and placing her mother's Bible on the bedside table. It was the only thing of her mother's she had managed to keep, and she ran her fingers over the worn leather cover. "Help me do the right thing," she whispered, not sure if she was praying or just talking to her mother's memory. When she went downstairs, she found Cole in the kitchen, staring helplessly at a pot of beans. "I was going to make supper, but I think these might be burnt." Josephine could not help but smile. "Let me see." She peered into the pot and confirmed his suspicion. The beans were definitely burnt. "Why do you not go wash up while I see what I can put together?" Cole looked relieved. "Are you sure? You must be exhausted." "I would rather keep busy," she admitted. He nodded and left her to it. Josephine explored the kitchen, finding flour, salt, a jar of preserves, and some eggs that were still fresh. It was not much, but she could work with it. By the time Cole returned, cleaned up and wearing a fresh shirt, she had made flapjacks and scrambled eggs, and had managed to salvage some of the beans. "It smells amazing," Cole said, and the wonder in his voice told her he was not exaggerating. They sat at the small kitchen table, and for a while they ate in comfortable silence. Josephine found herself sneaking glances at him. In the lamplight, she could see the weariness in his face, the signs that he had been pushing himself too hard for too long. "About your wages," Cole began, pushing his empty plate away. "I can pay you $30 a month plus room and board. Does that seem fair?" Josephine nearly choked. $30 was more than she had dared hope for. "That is very generous." "You are saving my life here," he said with a slight smile. "Literally, I think another week of my cooking might have killed me." She found herself smiling back. "What exactly would you like me to do? Besides cook, whatever you think needs doing. The house is yours to manage as you see fit. Cleaning, cooking, mending, laundry. If you are willing, I could use help in the garden too. We used to grow most of our own vegetables, but I have not had time to tend it properly." He paused. "I will be honest with you, Miss Abbott. I am running this ranch with one hired hand who comes 3 days a week. It is not enough, but it is all I can afford right now. I am barely keeping my head above water. But I am working on a plan to buy more cattle, build up the herd. If it works, this place could really be something." There was passion in his voice when he talked about the ranch, and Josephine found herself drawn to it. This was a man who had dreams, who was willing to work for them. "You do not have to call me Miss Abbott," she said. "Josephine is fine, or Josie. My mother used to call me Josie." "Josie," he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his voice. "Then you should call me Cole. No point in being formal when we are living under the same roof." They talked late into the evening, and Josephine learned more about the man who had saved her. Cole was 26 years old, had never been married, and had devoted the last 5 years to keeping his family's ranch running. He loved the land with a fierce devotion that reminded Josephine of how her mother had loved their small farm. "I should let you get some rest," Cole finally said, standing and stretching. "We keep early hours here. I am usually up before dawn." "I am used to early mornings," Josephine assured him. She lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of her small room. The bed was more comfortable than any she had slept in for years. The house was quiet except for the wind outside and the occasional creak of settling wood. She felt safe here, she realized. It was a strange feeling, one she had almost forgotten. Over the following weeks, Josephine threw herself into her work. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, mended curtains and clothes, and brought the neglected garden back to life. She learned Cole's preferences, that he liked his coffee strong and his eggs over easy, that he had a sweet tooth, but would never ask for dessert. Cole was respectful and kind, always thanking her for meals and complimenting her work. He was gone most days from dawn until dusk, working the ranch with his hired hand, a weathered old cowboy named Pete who treated Josephine with grandfatherly affection. But it was the evenings that Josephine came to treasure. Cole would wash up and join her for supper, and they would talk about everything and nothing. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, about the cattle drive he was planning for the fall. She told him about her mother, about the books she loved to read, about the garden her mother had kept. She tried not to notice how her heart jumped when he smiled. She tried not to think about the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed, or how strong his hands looked holding his coffee cup. She told herself it was just gratitude she felt, nothing more. But late at night, Alone in her room, she could not deny the truth. She was falling in love with Cole Whitmore. It was a dangerous thing, loving your employer. Josephine had seen what happened to women who made that mistake. But Cole was different, she told herself. He was honest and good and kind. He treated her like an equal, asking her opinion on ranch matters and listening when she spoke. One evening in late August, a storm rolled in across the prairie. Josephine watched from the kitchen window as dark clouds gathered on the horizon, moving fast. Cole and Pete were out checking the herd, and she worried they would not make it back before the storm hit. The first drops of rain were falling when she heard horses approaching. Cole burst through the door, soaked to the skin, his eyes wild. "We have got a problem," he said, water dripping onto the floor. "Part of the fence is down and about 20 head of cattle scattered. Pete is trying to round them up, but we need help." Josephine did not hesitate. "What can I do? You know how to ride. My mother taught me when I was young." "Then get some dry clothes on. We need every hand we can get." 10 minutes later, Josephine was mounted on a gentle mare named Daisy, following Cole out into the driving rain. The storm had unleashed its full fury, lightning splitting the sky and thunder shaking the ground. But Josephine barely noticed. She was focused on Cole's instructions, on helping him bring the scattered cattle back to safety. They worked for hours in the rain, Josephine's clothes soaked through and her muscles aching. But when the last cow was safely penned and they rode back to the house together, she felt a fierce pride. She had helped. She had been useful. "You were incredible out there," Cole said as they stood on the porch, both of them dripping wet and exhausted. "I could not have done it without you." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, and Josephine saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. He was looking at her the way she had been trying not to look at him, with something deeper than gratitude or friendship. "Cole," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. He reached out and gently pushed a wet strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "Josie, I need to tell you something. I have been trying to keep it professional between us, trying to remember that you work for me. But I cannot anymore. I cannot pretend I do not feel what I feel." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "What do you feel?" "I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "I think I have been since the day I met you. I know I have got no right. I know the situation is complicated, but I had to tell you. You deserve honesty." Josephine felt tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "I am falling in love with you too. I have been trying so hard not to, but I cannot help it." Cole's smile was like the sun breaking through the storm clouds. "You mean it?" Instead of answering, she stood on her toes and kissed him. It was awkward and wet and perfect, and when they broke apart, both of them were laughing. "We should probably get inside before we catch our deaths," Cole said, but he made no move to let her go. "Probably," Josephine agreed, but she kissed him again anyway. They eventually made it inside, where they changed into dry clothes and sat by the fire, drinking hot coffee. Cole pulled Josephine close and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling like she had finally come home. "What happens now?" she asked. Now we figure this out together. I want to court you properly, Josie. I want to do this right." He kissed the top of her head. "If you will have me." "I will have you," she said softly. "I cannot imagine wanting anyone else." The courtship that followed was unlike anything Josephine had imagined. Cole was attentive and romantic, bringing her wildflowers from the prairie and reading to her in the evenings. They would sit on the porch after supper, watching the sun set and talking about their hopes for the future. But it was not all easy. There were people in Tascosa who gossiped about the arrangement, who whispered that it was improper for an unmarried woman to live alone with a bachelor. Josephine tried not to let it bother her, but there were days when the stares and whispers got to her. "Let them talk," Cole said firmly when she mentioned it. "They do not know you. They do not know us. All that matters is what we know to be true." In September, Cole made his cattle drive to market in Dodge City, Kansas. It was a grueling 3-week journey, and Josephine worried the entire time he was gone. Pete stayed behind to watch the ranch and keep her company, regaling her with stories of his cowboy days and treating her like the granddaughter he had never had. When Cole returned, successful and with money in his pocket, he swept Josephine into his arms and spun her around. "We did it," he said, laughing. "We can buy more cattle, fix the fences, maybe even hire another hand." "I am so proud of you," Josephine said, and she meant it with her whole heart. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars come out, Cole took her hand. "Josie, I have been thinking about something, about us." "What about us?" He turned to face her, his gray eyes serious. "I love you. I have loved you for months now. I cannot imagine my life without you in it. I know we have not been courting for very long, but out here, time moves differently. When you know something is right, you just know." Josephine's heart began to race. "Cole," he stood and pulled something from his pocket, then dropped to one knee. In his hand was a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "This was my mother's. She told me before she died that I should give it to someone who made me as happy as she made my father. Josie, you make me happier than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Josephine's face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course I will marry you." Cole slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and kissed her deeply. When they broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. They were married in the small church in Tascosa on a crisp October morning in 1881. Reverend Michaels performed the ceremony, and what seemed like the entire town turned out to witness it. Mrs. Patterson cried through the whole service, and Pete served as Cole's best man, his eyes suspiciously bright. Josephine wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her make, and she carried a bouquet of prairie flowers that Cole had picked that morning. As she walked down the aisle and saw Cole waiting for her, his face full of love and joy, she thought her heart might burst from happiness. "I love you," he mouthed as she reached him. "I love you too," she mouthed back. The words they spoke were traditional, but the emotion behind them was anything but ordinary. When Reverend Michaels pronounced them husband and wife and Cole kissed her, Josephine felt like her whole life had been leading to this moment. The reception was held at the ranch, with neighbors bringing food and music. Someone had a fiddle, and they danced under the stars until late into the night. When everyone finally left, Cole carried Josephine over the threshold of their home, both of them laughing. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, setting her down gently. "That sounds good, does it not?" "It sounds perfect," she agreed. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, and afterward they lay tangled together, talking softly. "Thank you," Josephine whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me that day in the trading post, for giving me a chance, for giving me a life." Cole pulled her closer. "You have got it backward. You saved me, Josie. I was just existing before you came along. You gave me a reason to build something, to dream again. You gave me everything." As the months passed, Josephine settled into her new life as Cole's wife. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts. With the money from the cattle drive, they bought more stock and hired 2 additional hands, young cowboys named Tommy and Jack, who were hardworking and respectful. Josephine expanded the garden, started keeping chickens, and even learned to help with the horses. She proved to be a natural with the animals, patient and gentle. Cole often said she had a gift, that the horses trusted her in a way they did not trust anyone else. The winter of 1881 was hard, with bitter cold and heavy snows, but they weathered it together. There was something almost magical about those long winter evenings, sitting by the fire with Cole's arm around her, listening to the wind howl outside while they were safe and warm inside. In the spring of 1882, Josephine realized she was pregnant. She told Cole one morning over breakfast, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He stared at her for a long moment, then jumped up from the table and pulled her into his arms. "Are you sure?" "I am sure, Mrs. Patterson confirmed it yesterday when I was in town." "We are going to have a baby," Cole said wonderingly. He dropped to his knees and pressed his ear against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there. This is your father. I already love you more than you can imagine." Josephine laughed, running her fingers through his hair. "You are going to be a wonderful father." "I am going to try," he said, standing and kissing her. "I am going to try to be half the father mine was." The pregnancy was not easy. Josephine was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep anything down. Cole hovered over her anxiously, bringing her ginger tea and crackers, holding her hair when she got sick. "I am all right," she kept telling him. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Yes, but you are not just any woman. You are my woman, and I am allowed to worry." By summer, the sickness had passed, and Josephine bloomed. She grew round and healthy, and Cole could not keep his hands off her belly, marveling at every kick and movement. "He is going to be a fighter," Cole said one evening, feeling a particularly strong kick. "Or she," Josephine reminded him. "Or she," he agreed. "I do not care either way as long as you both come through it healthy." In late October, on a cool, clear night, Josephine went into labor. Mrs. Patterson came to help, along with Doc Henderson from town. Cole paced outside the bedroom, wearing a path in the floor. It was a long, difficult labor, lasting almost 20 hours. More than once, Josephine thought she could not do it, could not go on. But then she would hear Cole's voice through the door, encouraging her, telling her how strong she was, and she would find the strength to continue. When the baby finally came, it was a boy. He had a full head of dark hair and powerful lungs that he demonstrated immediately. Mrs. Patterson cleaned him up and placed him in Josephine's arms, and she fell instantly in love. Cole was allowed in then, and when he saw his son for the first time, he wept openly. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I do not deserve either of you." "You deserve everything good in this world," Josephine said softly, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. They named him Charles after Cole's father, and he was doted on by everyone on the ranch. Pete whittled toys for him, and the hired hands would take turns holding him in the evenings, these rough cowboys turning soft and gentle with the baby in their arms. Josephine had never known she could love someone as fiercely as she loved her son. But her love for Cole did not diminish. If anything, it grew stronger, watching him become a father. He was patient and involved, changing diapers and walking the floor with Charles when he cried at night. "I have got him," Cole would say, scooping up the crying baby. "You rest, love." As Charles grew from an infant to a toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Word spread about the quality of Whitmore cattle, and buyers came from as far away as Kansas City to do business with them. Cole reinvested the profits, buying more land and improving the facilities. In 1884, Josephine gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Catherine. She had Cole's gray eyes and Josephine's dark hair, and from the moment she could walk, she followed her father everywhere. Cole was completely wrapped around her tiny finger. "You are spoiling her," Josephine said, watching Cole give 3-year-old Catherine a pony ride around the yard while 5-year-old Charles rode his own pony nearby. "She is my little princess. I am supposed to spoil her," Cole said, not even slightly apologetic. Josephine just shook her head, smiling. She loved seeing this side of Cole, the playful father who would do anything for his children. Life was good, but it was not without challenges. In 1885, a drought hit the region hard. Water became scarce, and they had to drive the cattle miles to find adequate grazing. It was a difficult summer, and Josephine watched Cole age years in those few months, the stress weighing heavily on him. "We will get through this," she told him one night when he could not sleep. "We have been through worse." "Have we?" He sounded defeated, and it broke her heart. "Yes, I was traded for a horse once, remember? And then this stubborn cowboy gave me the horse and his heart, and we built something beautiful together. A drought is not going to break us." Cole looked at her in the darkness, and she saw his eyes glistening. "What did I do to deserve you? You saw me when I needed to be seen. You gave me a chance when I needed one, and you loved me when I had forgotten what love felt like." She took his hand. "We are partners, Cole. We face everything together." The drought eventually broke, and though they lost some cattle, they survived. The experience brought them even closer together, reminding them that their strength was in each other. In 1887, when Charles was 8 and Catherine was 6, Josephine found herself pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the previous two, and in early 1888, she gave birth to another son, whom they named Henry. He was a peaceful baby, content to observe the world with solemn, dark eyes. "3 children," Cole said, holding Henry while watching Charles and Catherine play in the yard. "We have 3 perfect children." "Our family is complete," Josephine agreed, leaning against him, but she was wrong. In 1890, she discovered she was pregnant once more, much to her surprise. At 31, she had assumed her childbearing years were over. "One more blessing," Cole said, placing his hand on her belly. "How did we get so lucky?" Their 4th child, another daughter named Grace, was born in late 1890. She had red hair, which puzzled them both until Cole remembered that his grandmother had been a redhead. With 4 children, the house was constantly full of noise and activity. Josephine had her hands full, but she loved every chaotic moment. Cole hired a young woman named Sarah to help with the housework, giving Josephine more time to spend with the children. Charles showed an early aptitude for working with cattle, often riding out with his father and the hands. Catherine was more interested in the horses, and by the time she was 10, she was the best rider in the family besides Cole. Henry was quiet and studious, always reading when he could get his hands on books, and Grace was fearless, climbing trees and getting into mischief. "They are going to be the death of me," Josephine said one evening, watching Grace try to catch a frog while Henry tried to tell her about the species she was pursuing. "They are perfect," Cole said, pulling Josephine into his arms, "just like their mother." As the years passed, the ranch became one of the most successful in the region. They built a larger house, though Josephine insisted on keeping the original structure as part of it, saying it was where their love story had begun. They added more hands, built better facilities, and invested in breeding stock. Cole's reputation as an honest dealer and skilled rancher spread, and the Whitmore name became synonymous with quality. But for all their success, Cole and Josephine never forgot where they had come from. Every year on the anniversary of the day they met, Cole would tell Josephine the story of seeing her in that trading post, of knowing immediately that he could not let Silas do what he planned to do. "I fell in love with you that day," he would say. "I did not know it then, but some part of me recognized you as mine." "And I am yours," Josephine would reply, "forever." In 1895, when Charles was 16, he asked his father about taking on more responsibility with the ranch. Cole was proud and slightly terrified that his boy was growing up so fast, but he agreed. Charles had a good head for business and a natural way with cattle. Catherine, at 14, announced that she wanted to train horses professionally. Cole was hesitant at first, worried about his daughter working in what was traditionally a man's profession, but Josephine supported her. "Let her follow her passion," Josephine said. "We raised her to be strong and independent." Cole relented, and Catherine proved to be exceptional. Word spread about the young woman who could gentle the wildest horses, and people came from all over to have her train their animals. Henry, at 12, showed more interest in books than ranching, and Cole worried that his middle son would not want to stay on the ranch. But Josephine reminded him that they should encourage their children to pursue what made them happy. "We cannot force them into molds they do not fit," she said wisely. Grace, the baby at 8 years old, was still figuring out her place in the world, but she had her father's determination and her mother's kindness, a combination that would serve her well. As Cole and Josephine moved into their 40s, they found themselves entering a new phase of life. They were no longer the young couple struggling to make ends meet. They were established, respected members of the community with a legacy to pass on. But more than that, they were still deeply in love. Cole would still bring Josephine wildflowers from the prairie. She would still make his favorite meals just to see him smile. They would still sit on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset, talking about everything and nothing. In 1898, Pete passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78. It was a loss that hit the whole family hard. He had been like a grandfather to the children, and a father figure to Cole after his own father died. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple headstone that read "Friend and Family." Cole gave the eulogy, his voice breaking as he talked about the old cowboy who had been there for him through everything. Josephine held his hand through it all, her presence a constant source of strength and comfort. Life continued, as it always does. Good years and hard years, triumphs and losses. Through it all, Cole and Josephine remained each other's anchor. In 1900, as the new century dawned, they celebrated their 19th wedding anniversary. The children had organized a party, inviting what seemed like half the county. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, but the best moment came late in the evening when the guests had gone home and the children were in bed. Cole and Josephine stood on the porch of their home, looking out over the land they had built together. "You ever think about that day?" Josephine asked. "When Silas tried to trade me, sometimes," Cole admitted. "I think about how close I came to never knowing you. It terrifies me. But you did know me. You saved me." Cole turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "No, love, we saved each other. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to build something lasting. You gave me a family and a home. You gave me everything that matters." Josephine smiled, the same smile that had captivated him 19 years ago. "And you gave me the same. You gave me freedom and love and a life beyond anything I dared dream." They kissed, and it still felt like the first time. After all these years, Cole's touch still made her heart race. His smile still made her knees weak. His love still filled her with warmth and joy. "I love you, Josie Whitmore," Cole said softly. "I love you too, Cole Whitmore, today and always." As they stood together under the stars, surrounded by the land they had worked so hard to build, they knew they had been blessed beyond measure. From the darkest moment of Josephine's life had come the greatest gift, a love that had weathered every storm, grown stronger with every challenge, and would endure until their last breaths. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and challenges. In 1902, Charles married a sweet young woman named Emma from a neighboring ranch. The wedding was a grand affair, and Josephine cried happy tears watching her eldest son take his vows. A year later, they welcomed their first grandchild, a boy named Cole after his grandfather. "I am too young to be a grandmother," Josephine protested, but she was absolutely smitten with baby Cole from the moment she held him. "Nonsense," Cole said, watching her rock their grandson. "You are the most beautiful grandmother in Texas." Catherine continued to make a name for herself with horses. At 21, she had built her own business and showed no interest in settling down, despite numerous suitors. "I will marry when I find someone who loves me the way Father loves you," she told her mother. "I will not settle for anything less." Josephine could not argue with that logic. Henry surprised everyone by announcing that he wanted to become a lawyer. He had been accepted to a school in Austin, and while Cole was initially disappointed that his son would not be taking over the ranch, Josephine reminded him that they had other children who loved the land. "Besides," she said, "it will be good to have a lawyer in the family." Grace, at 15, was developing into a remarkable young woman. She had her mother's compassion and her father's business sense, and Josephine suspected she would be the one to take the ranch into the future. In 1905, when Cole turned 50 and Josephine turned 44, they decided to take a trip, just the two of them. They left the ranch in Charles's capable hands and traveled to San Antonio, something they had always wanted to do but never had the time. It was wonderful to be alone together, to remember what it was like when it was just the two of them. They walked through the city, visited the Alamo, and stayed in a real hotel with indoor plumbing and electric lights. "This is nice," Cole said one evening as they sat in a restaurant, "but I miss the ranch," Josephine laughed. "We have only been gone 3 days." "I know, but home is where you are, and yes, you are here with me, but our real home is back there with our family and our land." "Then let us enjoy this a few more days, and then we will go home," Josephine said, reaching across the table to take his hand. They returned to the ranch refreshed and more in love than ever. Cole threw himself back into ranch work, though he was starting to let Charles take on more of the day-to-day responsibilities. Josephine focused on her garden and her grandchildren, of which there were now 3, with another on the way. In 1908, Catherine finally met her match in a horse trainer named Daniel Morrison, who came to the ranch looking to buy some stock. He was intelligent and respectful, and most importantly, he treated Catherine as an equal. They were married 6 months later, and Catherine did not give up her business, instead expanding it in partnership with her new husband. "She found a good one," Cole said, watching Catherine and Daniel work together with the horses. "Just like I did," Josephine said, kissing his cheek. Henry graduated from law school and opened a practice in Amarillo, close enough to visit regularly but far enough to build his own life. He met a teacher named Ruth, and they married in 1909. Josephine adored her new daughter-in-law, who shared Henry's love of books and learning. Grace, at 18, announced that she wanted to go to college, a radical idea for a young woman in 1908. But Cole and Josephine supported her, having always encouraged their children to pursue their dreams. She enrolled in a teacher's college in Dallas, promising to come home for summers and holidays. With the children grown and starting families of their own, Cole and Josephine found themselves entering yet another phase of life. They were grandparents now, with 6 grandchildren and more on the way. The house that had once been full of their own children's laughter now rang with the sounds of the next generation, but they also had more time for each other. They would take long rides across the ranch, just the two of them, remembering the early days when it was just them against the world. Cole would still bring her flowers. She would still make his favorite pie. They would still dance in the kitchen when no one was watching. "You have any regrets?" Josephine asked one evening as they sat on the porch, a ritual they had maintained for almost 30 years. Cole thought about it for a long moment. "Only one. I wish I could have spared you the pain of what Silas did to you. I wish I could have been there sooner." Josephine shook her head. "If things had been different, we might never have met. Everything that happened led me to you. I would not change that for anything. You are too forgiving." "No, I am just grateful. That day in the trading post, I thought my life was over. I thought I was going to be sold to the highest bidder and spend the rest of my days miserable. But then you walked in and you gave me something I had never had before." "What was that?" "Choice. You gave me a choice. You offered me a job, but you let me decide. You gave me my freedom, and then you gave me your heart. You showed me what love really looks like." Cole pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over the prairie. In 1912, on their 31st wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. All 4 children came with their spouses and children, filling the house with noise and laughter. At dinner, Charles stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who built this ranch from nothing, who raised us with love and wisdom, and who showed us what a real marriage looks like. Everything we are, everything we have is because of them." Everyone drank to that, and Josephine had to wipe tears from her eyes. Later, when the children were putting the grandchildren to bed and cleaning up, Cole led Josephine outside. The night was clear and cool, perfect autumn weather. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Cole, you should not have spent money on me." "Hush and open it." Inside was a beautiful locket on a gold chain. Josephine opened it to find tiny photographs of their 4 children. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Not as beautiful as you." He fastened it around her neck. 31 years ago, I gave you a ring that belonged to my mother. Tonight, I wanted to give you something that represents the family we built together." Josephine turned and kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. "Thank you for this, for everything. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for taking a chance on a struggling rancher with more dreams than sense. Best decision I ever made," she said. They stood together under the stars, and Josephine thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that terrible day in the trading post to this perfect moment, with children and grandchildren sleeping inside the house they had built together. She thought about the scared young woman she had been, being traded like property, with no future and no hope. She thought about the moment Cole had walked through that door, tall and serious, and changed everything. He had given her the horse, yes. But more importantly, he had given her his heart, his name, his life. He had given her children and a home and a love that had sustained her through everything. And she had given him the same. Together they had built something remarkable, something lasting. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, his arms around her waist. "Everything, nothing. How lucky I am, how much I love you." "I love you too, Josie, more than life itself." As they went back inside, where their family waited, Josephine sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. She had been traded for a horse by a man who saw her as property. But she had been saved by a cowboy who saw her as precious, who gave her everything he had, including his heart. And that had made all the difference. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, and the Whitmore family continued to grow and flourish. By 1915, Cole and Josephine had 12 grandchildren, with more expected. The ranch had expanded to over 3,000 acres, with a reputation for quality cattle that extended throughout the Southwest. Charles had proven to be an excellent manager, implementing new techniques and expanding their markets. He had 3 sons and a daughter, all of whom were being raised with the same values Cole and Josephine had instilled in their own children. Catherine and Daniel had built a thriving horse training business, and their expertise was sought after across Texas. They had two daughters who were already showing their mother's gift with horses. Henry's law practice was successful, and he and Ruth had 4 children. They visited the ranch often, and Henry never forgot his roots, even though his life had taken a different path than the cattle business. Grace had finished her education and married a doctor named Samuel Wright. They lived in Dallas, where she taught school and he had his practice, but they spent every summer at the ranch. They had 2 sons and a daughter, and Grace always said the ranch was where her children learned the important things in life. Cole, now 60, still worked the ranch daily, though he had slowed down some. His hair was mostly gray now, and there were deep lines around his eyes, but to Josephine, he was still the handsome cowboy who had saved her life all those years ago. Josephine, at 54, had also aged, but gracefully. Her dark hair had threads of silver, and there were laugh lines around her mouth. She spent her days tending her garden, spoiling her grandchildren, and loving her husband. They had weathered droughts and economic downturns, harsh winters and scorching summers. They had celebrated births and mourned deaths. Through it all, their love had remained constant, a steady flame that never dimmed. One spring evening in 1916, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Josephine said, "Do you remember what you told me the night you proposed?" "I said a lot of things that night," Cole replied with a smile. "You said that when you know something is right, you just know. That time moves differently out here. I remember. And I was right, was I not? You were absolutely right." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I knew that night that I would love you forever. And here we are, 35 years later, and I love you more than ever." Cole kissed the top of her head. "I feel the same way. Every day with you is a gift, Josie. Every single day." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The land stretched out before them, the land they had built together, worked together, loved together. In the distance, they could see some of the cattle grazing, and beyond that, the buildings they had constructed over the years. Everything they looked at represented their hard work, their dreams, their life together. No regrets. Josephine asked, a question she had asked many times over the years. "Not a single one," Cole replied, as he always did. "You. Only that we did not have more time. A lifetime is not enough with you." Cole pulled her closer. "Then we will just have to make the most of the time we have." And they did. They lived each day fully, loving deeply, cherishing every moment together. They watched their grandchildren grow, celebrated their children's successes, and took joy in the simple pleasures of life on the ranch. In 1920, they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary with a huge party that drew people from all over the county. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing. But the highlight of the evening came when Cole took Josephine's hand and led her to the center of the room. "40 years ago," he said, his voice strong despite his 65 years, "I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known. She was traded for a horse by a man who did not see her value, but I saw it. I saw her strength, her courage, her beauty. So I gave her the horse, and I gave her my heart. It was the best trade I ever made." Everyone laughed and applauded, but Cole was not finished. "Josie has given me 4 incredible children, 12 wonderful grandchildren, and a life fuller than I ever dreamed possible. She has been my partner in every sense of the word, working beside me to build this ranch, supporting me through every challenge, celebrating every victory. She is the love of my life, and I thank God every day that I walked into that trading post in Tascosa all those years ago." Josephine was crying openly now, as were many of the guests. "I love you, Josephine Whitmore," Cole concluded, "today and always." "I love you too," Josephine managed through her tears. They danced then, moving slowly to a waltz, and Josephine rested her head against Cole's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It was the same heart he had given her 40 years ago, and it still beat for her. As the years continued to pass, age began to slow them down. Cole's joints ached on cold mornings, and Josephine's eyesight was not what it used to be. But they adapted, accepting the changes that came with growing older while still cherishing each day. They handed over more responsibilities to Charles, who was now in his 40s and fully capable of running the ranch. This gave Cole and Josephine more time to simply enjoy life, to spend time with their grandchildren, and to appreciate the legacy they had built. In 1925, they welcomed their first great-grandchild, a boy born to Charles's eldest son. Holding the baby, Josephine marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. "For generations," she said to Cole that evening. "Can you believe it?" "I can believe anything when it comes to us," Cole replied. "We have built something that will last long after we are gone." "Yes, we have." Josephine looked around the room at the photographs on the wall documenting their life together, at the furniture they had chosen, at the home they had made. "We have built something beautiful." In the spring of 1928, Cole fell ill with pneumonia. At 73, his body did not have the strength it once did, and the illness hit him hard. Josephine nursed him tirelessly, barely leaving his side. "You need to rest," he told her one afternoon. "You are going to make yourself sick." "I am not leaving you," she said firmly. "We have been together for almost 47 years. I am not going anywhere." Cole took her hand, his grip weaker than it had been but still warm. "Josie, if something happens to me—" "Nothing is going to happen to you. You are going to get better. Let me finish." He waited until she nodded. "If something happens to me, I need you to promise me you will keep living, keep enjoying life, keep loving our family. Do not shut yourself away." "Cole, please do not talk like this." "Promise me, Josie." She could not refuse him anything. "I promise." But Cole recovered, much to everyone's relief. By summer, he was back on his feet, though moving slower than before. The illness had taken its toll, and he accepted that his days of hard ranch work were behind him. "I am officially retired," he announced one evening. "About time," Josephine said with a smile. "Now we can grow old together properly." And they did. They spent their days sitting on the porch, watching the ranch continue to thrive under Charles's management. They played with great-grandchildren and shared stories of the old days. They held hands and watched sunsets, grateful for every moment they had together. In 1930, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. The party was even bigger than their 40th, with family coming from all over to celebrate. They had 4 children, 16 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren, a testament to the love that had started in a dusty trading post in Tascosa so many years ago. 50 years, Josephine said that evening as they prepared for bed. "Where did the time go?" "Into building a life together," Cole replied. "Into raising a family and creating a legacy, into loving each other every single day." Josephine looked at her husband, at the man who had saved her and loved her and given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. He was 75 now, his hair completely white, his face deeply lined. But when he smiled at her, she saw the young cowboy who had walked into that trading post and changed her life forever. "I would do it all again," she said. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you every single time." "And I would choose you," Cole said, pulling her into his arms. "Always and forever." They settled into a comfortable routine in their later years. Mornings were spent slowly, enjoying coffee and watching the sunrise. Afternoons often found them in the garden or on the porch, and evenings were reserved for family dinners when the grandchildren or great-grandchildren visited. Cole's health remained stable, though he tired easily. Josephine, at 68, was still sharp and active, though her movements were slower than they had once been. They took care of each other, anticipating needs before they were spoken, the way only longtime partners can. In 1932, they experienced their first great loss when Catherine passed away unexpectedly from a heart condition. She was only 50, and her death shook the entire family. Cole and Josephine mourned deeply for their daughter, the girl who had followed her father everywhere and grown into a remarkable woman. "It should not be this way," Josephine said through her tears. "Parents should not outlive their children." Cole held her as she cried, his own grief a heavy weight on his chest. "She lived a full life, Josie. She followed her passion, married a good man, raised beautiful daughters. We gave her that foundation." The loss brought the family closer together, reminding them all how precious and fragile life is. It also deepened Cole and Josephine's appreciation for each day they had together. Time continued its relentless march forward. More great-grandchildren were born. Charles's hair turned gray. Henry's children had children of their own. Grace became a grandmother. The ranch continued to prosper, a testament to the foundation Cole and Josephine had built. In 1935, as Cole approached 80 and Josephine neared 74, they remained devoted to each other. Age had slowed their bodies but not their love. They still held hands. They still said, "I love you," every day. They still treasured every moment together. One autumn evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Cole turned to Josephine with a smile. "Remember when I gave you that horse?" Josephine laughed. "How could I forget? It was the day my life changed. I named her Freedom, you know. I never told you that. Freedom. That is a perfect name. I thought so. Because that is what you deserved. Freedom to choose your own path, to live your own life. I just felt blessed that you chose to share that life with me." Josephine felt tears prick her eyes. After all these years, he could still make her cry with his words. "You gave me so much more than freedom, Cole. You gave me love, family, purpose. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Cole corrected. "That is what makes us work." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Josephine rested her head on Cole's shoulder. They sat in peaceful silence, two people who had weathered life's storms together and emerged stronger for it. The years that followed were gentle ones. They watched their family continue to grow and thrive. They celebrated births and graduations, weddings and anniversaries. They mourned losses too, as is the way of life, but they faced everything together, just as they always had. In 1938, on a warm spring day, Cole and Josephine celebrated their 58th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them. They sat on their porch, holding hands and watching the ranch that had been their life's work continue to operate smoothly under the guidance of the next generations. "We did good, did we not?" Cole asked, his voice soft. "We did better than good," Josephine replied. "We did wonderfully." Cole turned to look at his wife, his partner, his love. At 83, he knew his time was growing short, but he had no complaints. He had lived a full life, rich with love and purpose. "I need to tell you something," he said. "What is it?" "Every morning for the last 58 years, I have woken up grateful. Grateful that I walked into that trading post that day. Grateful that you said yes when I proposed. Grateful for every single moment we have shared." He squeezed her hand. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Josie, the very best thing." Josephine smiled through her tears. "And you are mine. You saved me, Cole, in every way a person can be saved." They kissed then, a sweet, gentle kiss that held the weight of almost 60 years of love and devotion. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. That night, Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep, Josephine's hand in his. He was 83 years old, and he died as he had lived, surrounded by love. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, a testament to the impact Cole had made on everyone he met. His children and grandchildren spoke of his kindness, his integrity, his love for his family and his land. But it was Josephine's words that left few dry eyes. "My husband was the most remarkable man I have ever known," she said, her voice steady despite her grief. "He saved me from a terrible fate and gave me a life I never dared dream of. He was my partner, my love, my best friend. And while my heart is broken that he is gone, I am grateful beyond measure for the time we had together. He gave me the horse and his heart, and I will treasure both memories until my dying day." After Cole's death, Josephine continued to live at the ranch, surrounded by family. Charles and his wife moved into the main house to keep her company, and there was rarely a day that went by without grandchildren or great-grandchildren visiting. She spent her days tending her garden, reading and sharing stories of Cole with anyone who would listen. She wanted to make sure the younger generations knew what kind of man he had been, what kind of love they had shared. On the first anniversary of Cole's death, Josephine visited his grave on the hill overlooking the ranch. She brought fresh flowers and sat beside the headstone, talking to him as if he were still there. "I miss you every day," she said softly, "but I kept my promise. I am still living, still loving our family, still finding joy where I can. They are all doing so well, Cole. You would be so proud." She told him about the new great-great-grandchildren who had been born, about the expansion of the ranch, about the lives their children and grandchildren were building. And as she talked, she felt his presence somehow, a warmth that told her he was still with her in spirit. Josephine lived for 3 more years after Cole's death, years filled with family and love. She saw her 81st birthday surrounded by 4 generations of the family she and Cole had created. On a quiet evening in 1941, Josephine passed away peacefully in the same bed she had shared with Cole for almost 60 years. Her children were with her, holding her hands and telling her how much they loved her. "Tell Father I love him," were her last words. "Tell him I am coming home." They buried Josephine beside Cole on the hill overlooking the ranch. The headstones stood side by side, just as they had stood side by side in life. The inscriptions were simple but profound. Cole Whitmore, it read, "Beloved husband, father, grandfather, he gave freely of his heart." Josephine Whitmore, the other said, "Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she was loved beyond measure." The ranch continued to thrive under Charles's management and eventually passed to his children and grandchildren. The story of how Cole and Josephine met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. The original house, where they had first lived together, was preserved as a reminder of where it all began. And on the porch, right where Cole and Josephine had spent countless evenings watching the sunset, stood 2 rocking chairs, side by side. Because that was how they had lived, side by side, partners in every way. And that was the legacy they left behind. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, but a love story that proved that from the darkest moments can come the brightest light, that kindness and courage can change lives, and that true love, once found, lasts forever. She had been traded for a horse by a man who saw her as worthless. But a cowboy had given her the horse and his heart, and together they had built something that would endure for generations. It was a story of redemption and love, of partnership and devotion, of 2 people who found each other at exactly the right moment and created a life more beautiful than either could have imagined. And on the hill overlooking the Whitmore Ranch, beneath the endless Texas sky, Cole and Josephine rested together for eternity, their love story complete, their legacy secure, their hearts forever intertwined.